There's something in the air, a palpable yet invisible pressure that vibrates all around us. It's as if an unseen metronome sets the pace, and that rhythm grows ever faster, ever more relentless. We call it progress, efficiency, success. But what if something else hides beneath this polished facade? Something that whispers of an endless race, of an insatiable need to be more, better, faster. Look closely at the face of this era. It smiles at you from billboards, from social media feeds. This smile is flawless, radiant, devoid of any shadow of doubt. It's the face of someone always in the flow, on top of things, who wakes at 5 a.m., meditates, drinks a smoothie, runs a marathon, launches a startup, and radiates absolute inexhaustible positive thinking. He never tires, never doubts, never grieves. He is the embodiment of toxic productivity, the golden standard of our time. And admit it, he gets on your nerves. He evokes a dull, irrational irritation, doesn't he? This isn't mere envy or dislike of someone else's success. It's something deeper, more intimate. It's not just irritation at him. It's irritation at your own perceived inability to live up to this myth, this archetype, this perpetual motion machine, this marathoner without a finish line. He isn't merely an external figure. He is your internal productivity taskmaster, the overseer you've unconsciously cultivated within yourself. He whispers in your ear when you're tired, don't stop. He chastises you for moments of downtime. You're lazy. He brands doubt as weakness. Be positive. And the rage you feel when looking at his external manifestation is the anger of your own internal outcast. The one you've locked away in the dungeon of your subconscious is the anger of your need for rest, for vulnerability, for the right to make mistakes, for slowness, for doubt. Everything that has been declared unproductive and unworthy in this insane marathon for illusory perfection. Herein lies the paradox. The key is hidden precisely within this burning, sometimes irrational irritation. Not in suppressing it, not in denying it, but in closely examining it. This reaction isn't a weakness, it's a beacon. It points to the parts of your soul that have been exiled, branded, and forgotten. It cries out about your own unfulfilled need to be imperfect, tired, doubtful, to be human, not a machine for achievements. Acknowledging this rage, this exhaustion, this need for a pause means taking the first step toward bringing your exiles home. This is not defeat. It is an act of reclaiming sovereignty over your own soul. But why does this mechanism work so flawlessly? Why do we so readily embrace the role of overseer for ourselves? Why does the voice of the internal productivity taskmaster sound so convincing, while the cries of the internal outcast remain unheard? To understand this depth, to grasp how this cult of productivity has taken root at the very core of our being, we need to return to the scene of the very first transgression. We need to recall the moment we first encountered the judgment passed upon our vulnerability, our slowness, our right to simply be, not just to do. We've discussed the deep, irrational irritation that flares within us at the sight of the ideal, perpetually shining image of toxic productivity. This anger, this exhaustion, they are not just symptoms of overwork. They are the desperate call of the internal outcast, that part of us unjustly condemned for the right to simply be rather than to endlessly act. To truly hear this call, to understand the origins of the rage that boils against this imposed ideal, we must journey into the past, not the world's past, but the past of our own heart, into those hidden corners where the judgment first echoed, where this shadow first took root. Recall, where and when did you first feel that being slow was a vice, not a way to understand the world more deeply, that doubting was a sign of weakness, not wisdom and caution, that the need for rest was laziness, worthy of reproach rather than a vital necessity? For some, it was the quiet yet persistent words from parents. Why are you sitting idle? Do something useful. When you finish your homework, then you can rest. Until then, no games. For others, it was the unspoken rules of school, where the straight-A student, always ready with an answer, was a hero, while the daydreamer, lost in the clouds, was met with a condescending glance or a gentle reproach. Society, like an invisible sculptor, molded us from early childhood into a template that valued speed, infallibility, indefatigability, and a perpetual smile that concealed any shadow of doubt or fatigue. This shadow, the shadow of toxic productivity, was not formed by a single dramatic event, but through thousands of subtle touches, through barely perceptible signals, like water carving rock, gradually shaping us into the desired form. Perhaps you saw how those who pulled all-nighters for a project, who sacrificed their personal lives for their careers, were praised, while those who allowed themselves a pause, who valued balance, who dared to be vulnerable, were condemned, or even more subtly, simply ignored. Or perhaps you observed how those around you stubbornly ignored their own fatigue, considering it normal and even virtuous, and unconsciously absorbed that only such a path leads to recognition and success. In the air, in every advertising slogan, in every success story, in every piece of advice, there hung an unspoken yet pervasive rule. True success is linked to constant forward movement, to the denial of one's own needs, to a relentless pursuit of more, of new heights, of continuous growth. And everything that didn't fit into this paradigm, vulnerability, the right to make mistakes, the need for deep, unhurried reflection, even the simple human right to sadness or doubt, was gradually pushed beyond the threshold of consciousness, acquiring the status of undesirable, shameful, and at times truly dangerous for social survival. And so we arrive at the key question, at that nerve center where this internal drama originated, where the seeds of the shadow were sown in the fertile soil of your soul. At what exact moment in your life as a child or a youth, inquisitive and open to the world with its endless possibilities, did you learn that qualities so natural to human existence, the need for rest, vulnerability, the right to doubt, slowness, even the very right to make mistakes, the right to simply exist rather than constantly demonstrating your worth, were bad, shameful, unacceptable, or even worse, dangerous for your place in the world, for your love and acceptance? When and why were these inherent parts of your soul exiled from your inner tribe, declared strangers, unworthy of love and acceptance, locked away in the dungeon of the subconscious? This was not a single banishment, not a one-time judgment. It was a long, arduous process where each confirmation of the wrongness of these qualities hammered another nail into the prison door where your internal outcast now languishes. Its quiet whispers for peace are drowned out by the loud, relentless demands of the internal productivity taskmaster. Its sincere desire to be vulnerable is suppressed by the panic-stricken fear of being rejected, and its natural slowness is perceived as a threat to everything you've so diligently built in this fast-paced, uncompromising world. The longer these parts remain imprisoned, the louder their desperate cry, the deeper our internal burnout, the sharper the feeling that we are not living our own lives, but following external imposed rules, missing out on something true and alive. But this banishment is not merely the unique story of an individual lost in the labyrinths of their own past. It has its roots in far deeper layers of human existence, in universal principles by which the shadow forms and manifests, projecting its images onto the world and our own soul. And the realization of this first personal transgression against oneself, against one's true nature, opens the way to understanding far older and more powerful mechanisms that govern us from the shadows, demanding their return. For every exile, sooner or later, begins to demand its share, its unpaid debt, and its voice, though muffled, is capable of shattering the silence and demanding justice. This anger, breaking through the facade of impeccable productivity, is not accidental. It is not merely a burst of emotion, but a precursor, a messenger of what has been rejected, banished to the deepest recesses of the soul. We are speaking of the shadow, that universal force residing within each of us, woven from qualities that society or we ourselves under its watchful eye have declared unacceptable, wrong, unworthy of light. Imagine an ancient tribe where each member has their role, their gift, their place under the sun. But what if, to appease a new, rigid paradigm of survival, say a cult of relentless hunting and ruthless efficiency, a part of the tribe, those who don't fit this ideal, are suddenly declared wrong? Dreamers, or those who need long sleep, or those who dare to question the chief's path, or those who are simply tired. They are exiled. They move beyond the visible circle of the campfire, but they do not disappear. They remain beyond the threshold, accumulating strength, bitterness, unexpressed truth. We ourselves become such chiefs, ruthlessly expelling from our own inner tribe those qualities that the achievement society has declared toxic for productivity: slowness, vulnerability, the right to make mistakes, the need for deep and prolonged rest, doubts, indecision. Our internal outcast is precisely that part of us that was expelled from this tribe of perfection. It has not died. It has merely moved into the shadow, but its presence is felt more acutely than ever. This is where the energy of the unpaid debt comes into play. When we suppress any part of ourselves, we don't get rid of it. We merely create an internal debt. This debt accumulates energy like a dam holding back a powerful river. The longer and more stubbornly we refuse to acknowledge this debt, the stronger the pressure becomes, the more destructive its breakthrough can be. This is energy that demands recognition, demands its return. It manifests not only in burnout, but also in the irrational irritation we feel towards those who dare to embody our own exiled qualities. A classic example of this mechanism of suppression and the inevitable return of the shadow is found in Robert Louis Stevenson's literary masterpiece, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll, seeking to sever all inconvenient and dark aspects of his nature to create an ideal, virtuous persona, gives birth to Mr. Hyde. The deeper Jekyll drives Hyde into the subconscious underworld, the more desperately he tries to live without his shadow, the more powerful and destructive its return becomes. Hyde, being the embodiment of everything suppressed, eventually consumes Jekyll, proving that what is rejected does not disappear. It merely changes form, mutates, and seeks another, often destructive, path to manifestation. Like Jekyll, we try to amputate unproductive parts of ourselves, but they only gain strength. In our shadow, ready to burst forth at the most unexpected moment. And often this breakthrough manifests not directly, but through projection, through the irrational aversion to those who seemingly live freely with the very qualities we ourselves have exiled. It is in these external reflections, in the faces of those who seem unbearably slow, too sensitive, or perpetually doubtful, that we encounter a mirror of our own internal exiles. And they are not just random people, but archetypes of what we ourselves have refused to accept. Whenever an inner chord resonates with aversion, whenever our gaze fixes on another's figure with irrational irritation, we stand on the threshold of our own shadow, in the shadow of an achievement-driven society where speed and indefatigability are elevated to not just virtues, but absolute imperatives. There exist its heretics, those who, by their very existence unintentionally and without any malicious intent, expose our deepest internal prohibitions and repressed parts of ourselves. Who are these demons of our productivity, whose presence evokes such a biting sense of superiority, or even more often a sharp, almost physical aversion? One is the chronically tired, perpetually complaining, not someone seeking sympathy or manipulating weakness, but rather one whose fatigue seems a permanent state, a challenge to our own mask of indefatigability. His sighs, his slowness, his openness in expressing exhaustion, all of it is like a mirror in which we see our own carefully concealed weariness. We despise him not for weakness, but because he dares to be what we have forbidden ourselves, to be vulnerable, to be openly incapable of the constant race, to be simply tired without feeling guilty about it. In him we hate a part of ourselves that we have driven into the deep basement of our soul, ordering it to be silent and not reveal its presence. Another is the unacceptably slow, aimlessly wandering. This is the person who doesn't rush, who lingers on the threshold of action, who seems to have no clear goal, or even worse, has a purpose that we cannot call productive in the conventional sense. They might spend hours gazing out a window, reading old books, or walking without an apparent reason. Their measured pace, their refusal to race for efficiency, their ability to simply be rather than do, this is a challenge to our internal productivity taskmaster. In them, we see our own exiled capacity for contemplation, for pause, for the luxury of doing nothing, for the right to slowness, which we have cut off, convincing ourselves that any minute of downtime is an irreversible loss, a step backward. I recall one person, let's call him Mark. Mark was an artist, but not one who sold paintings at exhibitions. Rather, he simply drew for himself, for the process, for an inexpressible inner need. He could spend half a day gazing at clouds from his office window, or an hour examining a crack in the asphalt, claiming that his inspiration was born there. In a company where we all burned the candle at both ends, where meetings followed one after another, and emails never stopped, Mark was an anomaly. He came in later, left earlier. His desk was always cluttered not with reports and charts, but with sketches, strange notes, and fragments of poetry. He wasn't lazy in the literal sense. When he worked, he did so with deep immersion, but his rhythm was entirely contrary to our frantic pace. He could disappear for several days to, as he put it, accumulate emptiness, and then deliver an insight that, while perhaps not directly related to current tasks, was always imbued with some primal wisdom, gleaned not from management books, but from the depths of silence. Every time he unhurriedly drank his tea while we rushed to meetings, or when he smiled and spoke of his day of inaction, a wave of vague yet sharp irritation rose within me. It wasn't envy in the usual sense. I didn't want to be an artist. I didn't want to skip meetings. I didn't want to change my career. It was something deeper, a sense of injustice. How dare he? How can he allow himself to be like that? After all, we must be busy. We must be efficient. We must suffer for results. His very existence was a living reproach, a silent question to my own choice, a choice in favor of the constant race, in favor of suppressing any impulse to slow down, to pause. In his face, I saw my own internal outcast, the one who dreams of an hour of serenity, of aimless wandering, of the right to simply be without presenting the world with a report on their usefulness and without feeling shame for it. These figures, these demons of our productivity, carry something far greater than just an annoying habit. They carry a message encrypted in our own reaction. Hidden within their flaws are our own secret desires, our unfulfilled needs, our exiled virtues. What if behind each of these shadows, behind each of these vices that so deeply bother us, lies something valuable, something we once rejected, but which is desperately trying to return to our lives to heal them? What if these exiles are, in fact, our guides to lost wholeness? We have already touched upon those phantom images, those shadows that evoke irrational aversion within us, like beacons pointing to our own long exiled parts. But what if behind each such demon, behind each vice that we so vehemently reject in others, lies something deeply valuable, something we once tore out of ourselves and cast into the abyss of oblivion to appease the relentless internal productivity taskmaster? These are not mere flaws. They are distorted reflections of our own suppressed strengths. Take, for example, someone who constantly appears as chronically tired, perpetually complaining. We look at them and feel a prick of irritation, a desire to turn away, to label them a whiner, a weak link. But consider, what exactly do they allow themselves that we do not? They allow themselves to be vulnerable. They allow themselves to feel tired, even if it doesn't fit the schedule. They advocate, perhaps intuitively or unconsciously, for the right to rest, to pause, for their body and spirit to recover. They are not afraid to acknowledge their limits, their humanity. By exiling this demon into the shadow, we have in essence forbidden ourselves a crucial right, the right to genuine, deep rest, to acknowledge our own fragility, to express pain and discomfort without fear of judgment. We have forbidden ourselves the right to be imperfect, not always strong, not always inspiring. We have cut ourselves off from a source of deep regeneration, from the wisdom of the body that whispers of the need to stop. Or consider the unacceptably slow, aimlessly wandering, the one who, like the artist Mark, seems to live outside the temporal constraints of efficiency, who allows themselves to dissolve into the moment, not chasing tangible results. Our internal taskmaster shouts, "A waste of time, unproductive, where's the goal? Where are the KPIs?" But what if this vice is merely a distorted mirror of our own lost capacity for nonlinear thinking, for spontaneous creativity, for deep intuition that blossoms only in silence and stillness, far from the race? By exiling this slowness, we have deprived ourselves of the right to contemplation, to attention to detail, to deep immersion in a process without regard for the final product. We have forbidden ourselves the right to play, to experiment without guaranteed success, to simply be rather than constantly doing. We have cast aside the right to our internal rhythm, to trust that not everything valuable is measured by speed and efficiency, that sometimes the most direct path to a solution lies through apparent inaction, through wandering that is in fact deep internal exploration. Each of these exiles is not a curse, but a distorted messenger. It carries a message about a valuable ability, about a sacred right that we ourselves took away from ourselves, the right to pause, to vulnerability, to slowness, to doubts, to mistakes, to imperfection. These qualities are not weaknesses. They are fundamental pillars of human existence, sources of true strength and resilience. We carve them out of our soul, sacrificing them on the altar of insatiable productivity. But this sacrifice has not gone unnoticed, and its consequences manifest in our lives, sometimes in the most unexpected and painful ways. It is here at the invisible crossroads of our soul that the true cost of exile becomes apparent. We rejected a part of ourselves, designating it a demon of productivity. But what is rejected does not disappear. It merely changes form, returning to us as relentless, sometimes agonizing consequences. How does your fear of becoming like those we so carefully pushed out of our inner landscape force you to make decisions that turn against you in your career, in your personal achievements, in the very right to rest and well-being? Imagine an architect whose passion for their work knows no bounds. He fears being seen as chronically tired, perpetually complaining, because in a world dominated by the cult of inexhaustible energy, any complaint of fatigue is tantamount to an admission of weakness. This fear, like an invisible whip, drives him further, forcing him to take on new projects, work nights, and ignore his body's warning signals. He convinces himself that he needs to push through. Just a little more, I'll rest later. Consequently, his once brilliant projects begin to suffer from inattention to detail. His creativity wanes, giving way to formulaic solutions, and his health is slowly but surely eroded by chronic stress. Projects begun with enthusiasm are completed poorly. His reputation suffers, and dreams of great accomplishments shatter on the reefs of true exhaustion. He ran from the ghost of fatigue, but he himself became its embodiment, only now without the right to recognition or compassion. Or consider a young entrepreneur obsessed with the idea of being first. In his world, unacceptably slow, aimlessly wandering is synonymous with failure. He allows himself no pauses, no meditations, not even simple cloud gazing. Every minute must be filled with useful action, every step calculated and directed toward achieving a goal. He launches one startup after another, giving none of them time for organic development, for deep conceptualization, for unhurried exploration of innovative solutions. His projects are superficial, lacking uniqueness, because true breakthroughs are often born not in haste, but in the space of slow, nonlinear thinking, in that very aimless wandering that he so desperately rejects. His career is a chain of quick starts and equally quick failures as he denies himself the very slow process that is the foundation for deep, sustainable success. His fear transforms him into someone perpetually rushing, yet rarely achieving true depth. And what about personal relationships and well-being? The fear of being perpetually complaining forces us to hide our vulnerability, our doubts, our fears, even from our closest ones. We wear a mask of invulnerability, pushing away those who could offer support and thereby depriving ourselves of the necessary emotional release. This internal exile, yearning to be heard and accepted in its weakness, accumulates unspoken pain, which eventually erupts in sudden bursts of irritation, apathy, or even physical ailments. We sacrifice our well-being for the illusion of steadfastness. Perhaps you'll object, but isn't this the path to success? Isn't this the price for a place in the sun? If I stop pushing myself, won't I become that very slow person I despise? This is a natural, deeply ingrained fear. Society has instilled in us that stopping is degradation and vulnerability is weakness. However, herein lies the paradox. What we run from becomes our most persistent pursuer. The rejected need for rest doesn't disappear. It merely transforms into chronic fatigue, which ultimately makes us less, not more, effective. The fear of being weak deprives us of the ability to ask for help, leading to overload and mistakes. The fear of doing nothing kills creativity, which requires space to mature. True productivity, sustainable and profound, is born not from constant pressure, but from balance, from acknowledging all parts of ourselves, even those we are accustomed to calling demons. But while we push away some shadows, others seem to draw us in with an irresistible force, making us involuntarily bow before their brilliance, often without realizing how we ourselves lose our own light in their glow. We have delved into the murky corners of the soul where the internal outcast lurks and its demons reside, those parts of us rejected by an achievement-driven society, the need for rest, vulnerability, slowness. But the shadow is not always dark. Sometimes it shines dazzlingly, like a mirage in the desert. And this radiance can sometimes prove a far more insidious trap. Imagine that we not only push away what we consider bad or weak, but also project outwardly what we consider ideal, unattainable, divine. This phenomenon, which in depth psychology is called the golden shadow, we see in others qualities that thrill us, making our hearts pound with almost religious reverence, inexhaustible energy, unprecedented success, unshakable confidence, impeccable productivity. In a sphere obsessed with efficiency, these might be success gurus, tireless entrepreneurs, human machines whose capacity for achievement seems almost supernatural. We label them as an unattainable ideal, unconsciously convincing ourselves that these qualities belong only to them, and we ourselves are merely pale shadows doomed to forever play catch-up. But what if these shining qualities, these pinnacles we observe in others, are in fact merely reflections of our own unrevealed gifts? What if that boundless potential, that inner strength we so generously bestow upon our productivity idols actually resides within us, yet remains in exile because we don't believe in its existence inside ourselves? We admire someone's capacity for deep concentration and discipline while we ourselves remain stuck, feeling incapable of such feats. We revere someone's phenomenal energy, yet feel chronically burned out, unaware that the source of that very energy is locked within us, awaiting its liberation. This is where a subtle yet destructive mechanism of self-sabotage lies. When we project our golden qualities onto others, we deny ourselves the opportunity to manifest them. We willingly relinquish our power, our inner light, ceding it to external use. We begin to live by someone else's script, attempting to copy the outward manifestations of another's success instead of listening to our unique rhythm, to our own original melody of productivity. In this desire to be like them, we lose ourselves, our authenticity, and banish to an even deeper exile that part of the soul capable of true greatness, not copying, but creating. Consider, who is your idol or object of admiration in the realm of achievement and productivity? Perhaps it's the ideal success guru whose books you read cover to cover, or the tireless entrepreneur whose biography seems like a model to emulate. Now ask yourself the most probing question. What unmanifested talents of your own, what facets of your unique strength, your unrealized potential, have you perhaps unconsciously gifted to them? What aspects of your potential do you see in them but refuse to acknowledge in yourself? This might include not only the capacity for seamless work, but also deep intuition in decision making, a unique approach to problem solving, a rare ability to recover, or even a gift for inspiring others that you consider theirs, not yours. The projection of the golden shadow is not merely admiration, it is an act of self-denial that ultimately leads to the same burnout as the suppression of the dark shadow. For if we always strive to be someone else, we can never be fully ourselves and thus cannot achieve true, sustainable productivity that stems from wholeness. Understanding this dynamic is just the first step. The next is reclaiming what has been given away. The path into the depths of one's own shadow reveals not only what we once rejected, but also what we unknowingly relinquished. The inner exile, the one who languished in the prison of unproductivity, who whispered of the right to slowness, to doubt, to error, doesn't merely ask for freedom. It demands the return of its inherent power. For true power, that which fuels an unfailing spirit and inexhaustible creativity, is born not from suppression, but from completeness. Our task is not to destroy the prosecutor of productivity, but to rewrite its code, expanding the boundaries of its understanding until it recognizes the value of every shade of our being. This is not a rebellion against work, but an uprising for our own integrity, for the right to be not just a function, but a living, breathing essence. How then do we reclaim this strength, which is scattered across projections, divided between our idols and our irritants? Let's start with a simple yet revolutionary act, an act of conscious inaction. Find time, just 15 minutes a day, when you consciously allow yourself to do nothing. Not to meditate, not to read, not to listen to podcasts, not to plan, not to check email, not to scroll through feeds. Just be. Sit by the window and watch the rain without contemplating tomorrow. Lie on the couch and observe dust motes in a beam of light without feeling guilty about lost time. Listen to the silence without trying to fill it with noise. In these moments, your inner prosecutor, that unrelenting overseer who monitors your efficiency, will likely raise its voice, whispering about lost time, about unproductivity, about how you should be doing something. Don't argue with it. Don't try to silence it. Just listen. Notice how your body reacts to this doing nothing. Where does tension arise? What thoughts try to push you back into the hamster wheel of busyness? And then, through this familiar noise, listen to the inner exile. What does it whisper? What does it dream of? Perhaps a deep, free breath, the right to make mistakes, the right to simply be vulnerable without fear of judgment. Allow these sensations to be. This is not a time for analysis or problem solving, but for observation, acceptance, and reunification. This act of conscious slowness is not merely a pause in the endless race. It is an act of reclaiming sovereignty over your own life. It is a declaration that your worth is not determined by the number of tasks completed, a list of achievements, or the size of your bank account. Your worth lies in the very fact of your existence, in your ability to feel, to experience, to be. By restoring the exile its right to exist, you not only free yourself from the shackles of imposed efficiency, but also open the path to true, organic productivity. That which is born from inner peace, not from external pressure. That which allows you to see your true talents rather than projecting them onto external idols, those whom you once endowed with your golden shadow. This shadow, luring you from outside, now shines from within because you have reclaimed the qualities you once gave to the world, believing they did not belong to you. When the inner exile finds its voice and the prosecutor of productivity learns to listen, we begin to see the world anew. The boundaries between good and bad, productive and unproductive blur, giving way to wholeness. But what happens when this integration process truly begins? When we not only acknowledge our shadows, but also actively use their potential in daily life? How do our choices, our relationships, our path change when we cease to be hostages to external ideals and begin to live from the depths of our authentic strength? This is just one of many facets of the inner work that awaits us on the path to true freedom. For liberation from one type of chains inevitably opens our eyes to others, no less subtle but deeply rooted limitations that have held us captive until